Good morning, everyone. My name is Claudio Eppelman, and I'm the executive director of the in Latin American Jewish organization. And one of the things that I would like to welcome everyone for participating and for being with us during this event. And in the name of all of the organizing organizations, we again would like to thank you not only for being here at this session, but for the participation with speakers and panelists and members who are going to work in each of the groups during the process. And unfortunately, because of the health situation that the region and the world is going through, we're not doing this the way we would have liked to with by being together physically, but rather virtually, and with all the work process that we're going to continue over the next weeks. Before we begin, I would like to remind you that I would like everyone to have your microphones on mute. And then when you ask questions, I would like to invite you to do so using the chat feature. And this meeting is being organized by a group of organizations that are all participating as part of the G20 Interfaith Forum. And we have some very important people representing different organizations that are working. And before presenting our first speaker, I would like to just render homage to our companion who had been working with us during this process. And a few days ago, he passed away as a victim to COVID-19. So we would like to remember Norberto Padilla. And now I would like to invite and represent Catherine Marshall, a professor at Georgetown University in Washington, to speak. And she worked extensively at the World Bank and was deeply involved in religious matters. And so, in the name of the G20 Interfaith meeting, welcome. And you may go ahead and speak. Catherine, you're on
Can
mute.
you hear me now?
There we go.
Fine. Thank you and good morning. In the middle of the worldwide crisis caused by the COVID pandemic, the G20 has some special agents. The G20 Forum contributes ideas of religious communities to this process. This effort has roots in the G7, G8 processes, but since 2014 it has taken new forms and every time more solid. The condition is that the religious communities have a lot to contribute to these worldwide agendas about topics that go from public health until to corruption, minority, environment, and of course, in the center of the challenge is the ethical problems related to inequality and human rights. In this spirit, forums have had a place in the country, uh, in the host country, Australia, in 2014, then Turkey, China, Germany, Argentina, Japan, and now Saudi Arabia. And the Interreligious Forum of G20 tries to gather the ideas and experiences of diverse nets and all the educational programs that deal with the global agenda. And sadly, this important work often is ignored by the worldwide institutions, but it is deeply relevant for the daily life of citizens of all the world. In this context, the work of the main institutions, interreligious institutions that can be included, deals for peace, the United Religious Community, religious contributions with Catholic doctrines and social, and the work related to COVID from the Vatican, efforts to protect the culture or and participation in many topics of indigenous communities in the great organizations that are non-governmental or NGOs that are non-religious, like Islamic Relief. Their commitment with the multilateral organisms, including the World Bank, uh, and the other organizations for the civilization and for the United Nations. They give an opportunity to improve and improve the opportunities for all people. Uh, the Interreligious Forum associates thank this important talk, and they expect your ideas and opinions. What is the counsel that we need to offer to the leaders of G20 when they get together formally in November? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine. Now we will be hearing Albacete Ambassador Alvaro from Spain, who was responsible about relationship with the Jew community and currently is leading and co-leading as a secretary the Center about religion in Vienna. Alvaro, thank you so much for your participation. Microphone is yours. Thank you very much, Claudio. So I would like, in a briefly way, to talk about two aspects that we have been highlighted in and the first one is the importance about religion and leaders and community represents. Also, speaking about colleges and academies and religious leaders working together for the common objectives. And she had mentioned a few of them, as a development, education, health, but also about ethic, business, and that if we don't do anything about the authorities doing something about, speaking about a moral message, we're missing the answers. And this is the reason to be about the G20 unite the world and the political world about and speaking about respect, knowing that we encounter different realities, but we can be complements, so we can assume strengths, so we can work together. So the second aspect that I would like to highlight, and that it's been emphasized, is the fact that this process of G20 is a process that includes a lot of actors representing religions, and different organizations, uh, multi-faith, and speaking about colleges. And this is an essential aspect of this process. And we have to preserve this if we want to keep it as an entity in the future. It's really important the voices of religion need to be go on beside authorized voices about thinking growth, and be with for voices, political voices, and so we can assume strengths, so we can accomplish these objectives that we have been talking about. I remember and appreciate the development about this G20 and many of the participants that were in that moment. And I think that was the moment that was really really important because we had a lot of representatives and in the different discussions and representative religious, and we have been building a way to work that it's been taking us to this point, and we think and we're sure about that we can get so many more about this in the future if we get to involve more people. And I want to highlight about this process in this Latin America. It's been working together with so many people, and we have been preparing meetings with G20, and we have been developing meetings in different parts of the world, Asia, America, North America, and all these processes at the end summarize an encounter, a physical encounter that we hope we can have in Arabia, but we have to wait the COVID and see if it's gonna let us to be and to gather together, and if it's not possible, we have this option to make it happen. And we want to highlight about this meeting, whatever it is, physical way or virtual way. Uh, it's really important for our religion, for the Muslim religion. We can hear voices and different points of view about different religions and get to hear different representatives in the world. So, having said all this, we want to thank for to each one of you, and we want to thank you, Claudio Eppelman, and I'm gonna be here, and I'll be working with you, and I'll be recommending if it's possible, then having a meeting in September. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alvaro. And now I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, the General Secretary of the Iberoamerican Center, an important regional organization that covers the countries of the Iberian Peninsula with Latin America, which goes across the Atlantic Ocean to try to bring together Latin America, Spain, Portugal, Andorra, and Europe in general. It's a great initiative headed by a wonderful person, Rebecca Greenspan. And thank you very much for being with you. It is an honor to have you here at this forum, and you have the word.
Thank you very much, Claudio. And I thank you and Elias with the Religions for Peace and Latin America and Caribbean because you always have been in the Inter-American summits, and it's an honor to be also in this event that leads us to the G20 and with that frame of the G20. And thank you. And I think we have to start by saying I I missed something here. Can you see me really well? Very elegant.
Yes, we can see you. Oh, now we can't see you. Now you shut down your camera.
I don't know what happened here, but give me 1 second only. I have you here and now.
There we go,
Okay,
Rebecca.
thank you very much. Thank you. I was saying that the world is facing one of the worst humanitarian crises in the last century. Without a doubt, it is the crisis, the most serious, the deeper crisis that I have seen as an economist, as an internationalist in politics. And we know what are the pronostics for Latin America, but Claudio, we have to repeat them because only in this way we will know the importance and the urgency of our actions. And we know that they are projected that we expect 45 million more people in Latin America and Caribbean that they will drop below the line of poverty. And from this number, from those 45 million, 28 million of people, they will fall in extreme poverty. And extreme poverty in our region means hunger. And I was saying, Catherine was saying very well that one of the most important contributions of this forum is the ethics, inequality, and human rights topics. And there is no doubt that those human rights will be vulnerable by this pandemic. 3 million of enterprises will have to close. And in this moment, 160 million of children and youth are outside of that school environment, and most of them in the vulnerable sectors without access to an education, remote education. And we know also that the possible loss of employment, the increase of an big element in our region is that half of our workforce is in the informal sector and therefore is without the social protection. And each one of these numbers, there are people who are suffering, people who can be suffering hunger, their dreams being delayed, being afraid of that darkness, of a very uncertain future. All of them, in all cases, they are looking for hope, an opportunity to build their future and their families, to look for a new normal, but it is not just a new one, but a better one. And at this moment, in which so many things are scarce, and the most pressure keeps being hope, the faith that has been manifested in so many ways in the history of humanity. And in the brighter periods and the darkest ones. This is not the first desert that we will go through as people. It won't be the first time that we will have this to guide us, but our ancestors, all of our people, they have gone through sands like this one and worse ones. And that's why we have to be together to go through this pandemic. Now, there is an aspect of this pandemic that is a little bit different of this crisis, that is health, that is economic, that is social, and that I hope is not also a major one. And it is that the impact of this pandemic, it is tremendous because it uh, entails all the countries in the world. There is not one country in the world that is not feeling the consequences of this crisis that we are going through in the pandemic of COVID-19. We are uh, in front of a crisis that is not. It doesn't have anybody to blame for. Everybody has a role because we need to come out of this together. And I remember this phrase so important at this time. And it is the one that says that a society is as strong as it is this weakest of its members. And I think that is true for our countries. It is for our regions and it is for the whole world. So if we are going to come out of this crisis, it is necessary that all the institutions of society, as Alvaro said it, that they can combine the strengths for the peace, for dialogue, and for solidarity. Each one within their own environments, in our diversity, the efforts of recovery has to come also from the base of that pyramid and from the families, from the educational institutions, from the companies, from the local governments, from the neighboring regions, and everybody, and of course, of all the prayer centers that are represented here. I am conscious and I am aware of all the sacrifice that each one of you has made and your congregations in these hard months of pandemic. And among those is closing your prayer places to help all of the participants from contagions. And that help that we can have for all the population that is more in need. And so if we all are here, it's because regardless of the uncertainty of the hardships, that we all have given the first step to cooperate. But especially if we are all here, is because we recognize finally that we are all going through the same desert, because we know that only together we can come out of this. Behind this mutual acknowledgement, there is an opportunity. Maybe the greatest opportunity that this crisis leaves is the opportunity to reevaluate the things that we can together do as a society in the broad sense. And before the pandemic, we were going through another pandemic, the distrust, the polarization pandemic. To heal from one pandemic, we can also heal from the other, and correct those unfinished tasks of uh, the 20th century to solve the poverty, the access of basic services. And Claudio, I have said also that maybe the 21st century is starting out, that the centuries don't start chronologically. Maybe the 20th century started with the First World War. And for people, maybe in terms of their lives and the impacts in their lives, it's starting now. So, dear friends, I think that we need an agreement, a broad agreement, a new social agreement based on the pillars of protection, of participation, and transformation. A new social agreement that doesn't leave anybody behind, that includes all the social leaderships, and that can be the vehicle to not just go out of the not only get out of this crisis, but also to start a new future uh, that is more inclusive and most sustainable. I finish saying with all humility, as Catherine said, to ask three petitions of you. One is that we advocate at the G20 for the developing countries that don't have the needed resources to come out of this by themselves, and they need the external help for the task that we all share, so that our children, our youth, they don't go out of this educational system because of the crisis, and that they can bankrupt their future to be able to give health to all of those who are needed. And in third place, I would say, dear friends, that I would ask you that to build this future, this better future together, that we can take to our people, to those villages, because the exit out of the desert is not towards the horizon. This time, the exit out of this path that takes to the exit of the crisis is a path that will take us to our reencounter. And that is the opportunity that we have today. I thank you sincerely again, and the best of luck to you in all these meetings.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, for your contribution, and which was truly significant and with some very practical ideas to ponder and, above all, to act upon. Thank you, Rebecca. We're now going to have a block where we will have four religious leaders who are going to speak according to four different religious traditions that reflect the diversity of the region in terms of religion, and also some important things to point out. Living together, and first I'm going to invite Cardinal Pedro Barreto, who's the Archbishop of Huancayo and the first Vice President of the Episcopal Peruvian Conference, who is with us from Lima. Thank you, Pedro, and welcome. Your microphone is muted. Let's see if the operator can help him unmute his microphone.
Okay. I am very grateful for this invitation to be here in this forum about interfaith for peace. And I want to talk about three aspects that we have been talking about: the effects, the economic effects of the COVID 19. So, these consequences have been visible. Well, we already know, but we definitely was the economic system and the main system in the world. And that's why we have to be conscious with the brother Francisco, the Pope Francisco, about saying in a clearly way that this system has failed. He mentioned it before the COVID-19. The poverty growth is making us think about that we have to change this in a radical way, and this economical system kills, and it's a failure. So that's why we have to look for a new model, a development model, different. And there's a few voices about new economy, but we have to think about the economy as a part, as an important part of this preposition about the development. And as second place, we have to take care of life. If we're learning something about COVID-19, it's taking care of lives. The because that's the way that God wants us to do, and that's why we have to be conscious that this life is a gift from God, and we have to take care of it. But also, we have to take care of our house, our home, our common home, that it's affected for the sickness, that we have to accept this pandemic that before COVID-19 we lived the pandemic and the sickness about the climate changes, that is an effect and a consequence of the treatment and exploitation, irrational exploitation of the natural resources that we have, and that it's just a privilege of a few, and we don't get benefits for everyone because from our faith, from the church, God created all the resources for all of us. And speaking about this, it's really important to point that this activation, economy activation, but also as a team, we have to make like a platform, like a strong one, a strong foundation, really, so we can fight about the effects and consequence of the climate change. The climate change is developing and developing in a fast way. Last June it was worldwide new about a city in Russia that was one of the cities. It is one of the coldest cities in the world. It was having a hot weather at this moment. So we have to be conscious. If we want to fight against COVID-19, we have to fight against this pandemic of climate changes. And at last, I want to say about this that um, speaking uh, about the Amazonas has been one of the loans of the world. So Pope Francis spoke with a few bishops, and so they could have a meeting in Rome with a few Amazonic Indians. So after that experience between a few more, so we hear these voices, and so we are looking to fix a few things about how these people have been pressure has not been part of the humanity. So I want to point our
What we propose is that we join all of our voices around this, what Pope Francis offered us in 2015 about caring for our common house. And that's why I'm deeply pleased to participate in this event of Religions for Peace, because peace is possible. And we need to show that COVID-19 is global in its reach, but it is also elitist in terms of how it is treated. Many brothers and sisters in Latin America, in Peru, are suffering from a health system that fails to respond to the great number of brothers and sisters. And so may God be with us and bless us, and may this meeting also serve to promote joint access for peace from our religious institutions. Thank you very much, Cardinal. And it will now be Omar Aboud from the Islamic Institute and co-president of the Interreligious Institute. Thank you for being with us. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Claudio, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you. And once I had to write for a presentation regarding the issues that we're going through in terms of interfaith issues, something that is often not very visible in major forums such as the United Nations, G20, and it seems that interfaith issues are not considered that important in terms, and basically also because of with all of the spirituality that it has in the world. But my thoughts are the following. You know, I've been talking with different friends, people we spent time with at different conferences and that we've worked with in terms of interfaith dialogue, and which we've had over for more than 20 years. Some have been involved for longer and some joined us later on, but this is a whole area that has to do with a structure that I think in a certain way has a peak in the document that was signed 2 years ago. But basically, we have formed relationships and circumstances regarding issues such as violence, attacks, fundamentalism. But one thing I was thinking about is that with all of the energy and all of the structure and brotherhood that we have created over all these years in Latin America and also in the other continents, those things have made us ready for this moment, because in some way, this moment, the idea of the day after, it's not the day after, it's a long process, a tedious process, a complex process in many aspects, like the Cardinal mentioned, like Rebecca said, in terms of the economies. And so this whole structure necessarily requires that we use our voices, our vision, our synergies, and this idea of brotherhood, this idea of coexistence. We need to apply this to the day after, and this whole crisis that we have experienced in our lives and the world with the bipolarity. We have never faced anything quite like this, and the reason is that the issues that are the most rigorous ones, or that we have discussed in terms of scientific issues, this has a very particular nature in terms of COVID-19. So there are some issues, there are some contradictions with regard to economy, others with regard to science. But I don't think there are any contradictions regarding the issue that we have been discussing in terms of ethics and resolution of major conflicts. And like Francisco said the last time he spoke, we don't leave these crises on our own. And I think that all of these interfaith energies need to put all of their strengths and energies so that we can feel the voice and propose a more fair aspect to this new reality, so to speak, or this new modern world that we're living in the post-pandemic. And obviously, we live in one of the most unequal regions in the world. And the poverty levels are alarming. We see the big countries or the major powers in terms of economy, and it is true. And imagine what that means in terms of Latin America. And basically, an example that we can give is what the father said recently in terms of climate, what Father Barreto said recently regarding the climate. And it's true that we can wait for science to resolve the climate issues and how to turn around the negative effects that they have. But this is also a deeply ethical issue, and I believe that the religious vision in terms of transcendence at this point in time in particular, the world is playing one of its most important cards. And so our vision, our idea of creating a more equal world, the economic failure of this system, where in a certain way many democratic countries such as we here in Latin America eventually end up being in opposition to the organized minorities. And so, the voices where we can exercise some type of representation or transcendental characteristics in terms of a new humanism. And so I believe that of all of the G20 processes that we have experienced, each area of the interfaith space is the voice where we have the virtual voice, or perhaps, or whatever word is appropriate, because if all of the efforts that we put into creating peace must be relative. And so the vision from a perspective that we need to have with the idea of this construction that we've had over all these years in terms of dialogue, I believe that this is the time to translate it into a fight for justice. And basically, we cannot allow all these issues to be ignored. Thank you very much, Claudio, and have a great day, everyone. Thank you, Omar. Your contribution was very valuable in terms of the invisibility of some issues, and I'm now going to give the floor to Ruben Prioretti, president of the Latin Evangelical Alliance. You may speak.
Thank you, Claudio. So I'm really grateful for all the members for this G20 forum, for this invitation that I have received, and I congratulate for this great meeting and for the so we can reflect about the topics that we inspired to be together at this agenda. I think which has been talked before us has been a general view for what the Latin continent makes us stronger. And I want to talk about, and I want to say hello to everyone. So the Evangelical Alliance is built for nations of 22 nations, representing millions of evangelic people in Latin America, Brazil, and for some United States. Speaking about our faith, the gospel teaches that we have been created as a God was. each person in each country, in each tongue, it's in the same distance from God's heart, and He loves each one of us. So it's a God that is equal for all of us. So our future requires co-work together. So while we work to front these problems, we require from us a commitment to renew our visions about the human quality and about welfare. So it's really important in Latin America, particularly speaking after COVID-19 and its consequences. And I want to talk about a study from CEPAL that millions of the population in American Latin poverty will increase more than 10%, affecting a few millions and making disappear a few advances. So someone is writing about how American Latin was making progress, but after this, it's a pullback for us. So before crisis, American Latin was growing in a slow way. After COVID-19, it's impacting a few prices and the tourism, so it will increase a fall. But the most serious problem it will be the impact, the social impact that will be really deep due to the informality of the region, estimated in 50%. So this makes difficult to make a few workers without being covered, which takes so.
And that also will lead to increased child labor as well as an increased death rate. And approximately 3 million companies are estimated to lose 8 million jobs. And like we've said, half of the people work without a formal employment, and so it's going to be difficult to maintain it. At the same time, it is also a terrible pressure on the governments in terms of public health. And with respect to Latin America, like Rebecca said, we need to discuss poverty and extreme poverty. She spoke about 45 million and 28 million, 45 million poor people and 28 million people live in extreme poverty. And it also has to do with the area of immigration, which has been a major issue, especially in recent years. And so these are challenges that we need to face together, and that's why we're here. The civil society, governments, and especially the religious organizations that we represent. Without our faith, we need to put our faith in the search of a common solution, and we need to seek a contribution through faith, which is such an important topic for Latin America as our governance and faith, so that we can and so what natural resources do in the environment, like as has been discussed, and also the multiple socioeconomic challenges that we're going through together with increased addictions and other issues that come along with the pandemic, such as emotional and climate issues. And as religious leaders, we need to put forth a joint effort and take action to deal with the urgency that this issue requires, and need those who most need it in the moment of challenge, because that is when demand increases. It is in these circumstances where dialogue becomes an interfaith dialogue becomes extremely important to bring a message of peace to the millions who do not have it. And I repeat the importance of what Rebecca said, and to build bridges between men and women to improve their level of living. And also the exercise of religion in our continent is essential. And if we wish to have sustainable development in our countries, and this freedom is not obvious, and many men and women are not able to express their faith, whatever it is, fully. And so governments need to respect the religions of people and human dignity. we need to use the necessary mechanisms in order to deal with that, in order to provide help for that. It was also mentioned in terms of the environment that we need to put more emphasis on the responsibility of religious leaders, because caring for the environment in our region is something that is considered a mandate from God. The scriptures tell us to be good administrators of His creation, and not to not promoting that in religious organizations means to compromise the environment for the future. We know that deforestation efforts and climate changes in the world continue to be a disaster in Latin America, and it affects the economy and especially the most vulnerable. We also must mention that religious organizations need to be defenders of human rights and to be opposed to violations of human rights such as torture, harassment. And this also applies to students, civil societies, journalists. We also denounce the system of differences between the new forms of slavery that affect so many people and which we consider an attack against human dignity. And as faith leaders, we need to be concerned about the unequal economic development, which affects a large part of the 600 million people, so that people can have access to a better life. And my dear friends, this is what we're committed to. And as we seek contributions, we can reach a dignified future. May God bless and protect you from the Latin American Evangelical Alliance. We're with you in search of a better future for Latin America. Thank you very much, and may God bless you. Thank you very much, Ruben. And we will now hear from Rabbi Michel Sleshinger, who is a rabbi from the Pauline Israelite congregation in Sao Paulo, and he's also in charge of the Interfaith organization, Jewish organization of Brazil. Go ahead, Michel.
In a small Polish town, there were not clockmakers. And when a clock was broken, people would put it aside and they couldn't use it anymore. Nonetheless, some people, they kept giving, turning the little knot to the clock, and other people simply they abandoned it in a box. One day, a visitor came to this city, and the citizens they found out that he was a specialist in clocks or watches, and so the residents asked this person to stay one more night in that village and repair all the watches that were broken. And that's what happened. The next day, some of the watches and clocks were repaired and others weren't. The villagers then understood that those watches and clocks that the owners kept uh, working on were able to be fixed. And the watches that were left in the box, there was no way to fix them. Um, we give, we face a collective challenge. The new pandemic of COVID-19 challenges to choose carefully what watches we need to keep working, winding, and or which ones do we want to leave at the bottom of the box. During this social isolation or distancing, uh, some learned to exercise, others learned to cook, others studied a new language or learned to touch a new musical instrument. As religious leaders, it depends on us to decide what muscles we want to keep strengthening and which ones we will allow to weaken. in this region of the planet, Latin America, we are witnesses of huge challenges. The social differences increased with the unemployment generated by the COVID. The environment will be more attacked in ways that haven't been before if there is not a clear politic of preservation. The corruption will be more broadened if there is no education and application, universal application of those laws. All of those challenges are not Christians, they are not Muslims or Jewish, they are human ones. Because of this reason, I recommend that we keep strengthening the muscles of dialogue. The Latin American Jewish Congress, led by my friend Claudio Edenman, Religions for Peace, led by Elias Shitney. They have been doing a great exercise to stimulate the closening of the approaching of different people from different religious institutions during the pandemic. The meetings were performed, were carried more often with the safety of the digital frame. That and hopefully this can be as an example in other parts of the world. Friends, let's keep strengthening the muscle of dialogue, and let's keep winding the watches or clocks that we want to work when all of this is behind us. Shalom.
Thank you very much, Michel. Wonderful story about the clockmaker, and this means that we have finished these four presentations by religious leaders, and now the next chapter of this inauguration act in the regional consultation for the G20 Interfaith Forum. We're simply going to mention that their work has to do with four different working groups, four working groups that are going to continue developing and enriching some of the reflections that we've heard about today and that are also going to be part of this work. And this will be around four different topics, which are part of the groups. The first of them will be about economic and social challenges. The second one regarding response to the COVID-19 crisis and religion, governance and faith, and then finally the environment. And these four pillars will be what some recommendations will be touching on that will be issued by G20 members, and each of these groups will receive contributions and will be coordinated by someone who will be in charge of expressing each of these contributions and will then have the difficult task of synthesizing these things and sharing it in a paper. And so we're going to introduce each of these four coordinators for the four different groups. First of all, we have the Economic and Social Challenges Group, a topic that many have already made reference to. And this group will be coordinated by Jorge Knoblovitz, president of the Argentinian Israelite organizations, who is with us from Buenos Aires. Jorge, go ahead, and you have the floor. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you very much, Claudio, for having invited me to this historic meeting. And Alvaro Caicetti from CAICID, I would like to thank him for the work that we're carrying out together. And I believe that what we need to ask ourselves is why we're doing this, and then why us? Why are we the ones who've been asked to do it? And if there's a sector, what we can do is we have been invited here, Michael and Ruben, because That's where the entire civil society is. And like Rebecca and Raven said, Latin America is the most unequal continent. Not the poorest continent, but the most unequal one. And a very small portion have 40% of the wealth, and many people live in poverty. So this has a major social effect, and if we don't deal with it in terms, we will have major historic crises. And that's why this space that has been created after the G20 needs to create a platform where civil society can provide the appropriate tools for the political society, because sometimes there's some confusion in terms of the social agenda. And I believe it was Rubin who said that elitism is totally contrary to solidarity. And if there is inequality in Latin America, such as gender inequality, age inequality, there's an increase in slavery, an increase in violence against members, in Argentina at 35%. And so this agenda where the leaders, where the faith and intercultural leaders in Latin America, we are an example, because if there is a continent that can show an example of coexistence and conflict resolution, then it is clearly Latin America. Argentina and other countries in the world, the religious organizations are not exempt from crises, but basically we always have the necessary agreements and a space for dialogue, like the people who are here, who have engaged in order for us to be able to reach agreements. The challenge is to be able to create efficient tools for resolving problems, but we must do so immediately, because the gap in Latin America continues to grow. And if we don't reach an agreement in terms of the third sector, then poverty will undoubtedly become extreme, and elitism is going to increase. And so what I ask all of us is to continue to work together. Thank you very much, Claudio. Thank you very much, Alvaro.
Thank you, Jorge. Now we will be listening to Juan Navarro Floria, and he has the difficult task to resume a few ideas about the responses of religious communities, about the answers with the COVID-19. Juan, from Buenos Aires, microphone is yours.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Claudio.
Claudio. And we have an extensive agenda for the G20. And so I'd like to talk about some topics and the priorities, and also those issues that apply to the religious organizations and where they can make a major contribution. This year was not going to be any different until the breakout of the COVID-19 pandemic, which, as we all know, has affected all of humanity. We have discussed extensively about it, but is this something that has affected all people, and is also and it has also represented a major challenge in many areas for religious organizations. And faced with this situation, we decided to discuss this during the conference in October, and also during this regional effort. We would like to reflect on this challenge from a Latin American perspective, which has its own issues such as major inequality, a continent where there have been major effects from the pandemic. Particular attention has been paid to this phenomenon from the beginning, and not only because it changed the way processes worked and recommendations, but also because it has introduced challenges for interfaith dialogue. And so in April, I sent out a message regarding this and these health issues, and the response have garnered a great deal of attention and at basic levels. Both the Inter-American Court of Human Rights as well as the Inter-American Human Rights Committee have called attention to this fact. And many religious freedoms have been majorly restricted, including restrictions on meetings and assemblies, restrictions on the number of people who can attend religious gatherings, such as funerals. Now, these things are often legitimate, and at the same time, religious organizations have played a major role in combating the pandemic, with leaders promoting personal care in the communities. And the religious organizations are also in the front lines of protecting the vulnerable. Social action and the need for interfaith cooperation. And on the other hand, the pandemic also points out critical needs for the state and for society, and priorities in terms of those who are ill, and issues that are going to deepen the inequalities that we already have. We need greater drinking water reserves. Many people do not have access to drinking water, for instance. Issues in terms of insecurity and other matters. It is also a matter of the cost of and access to medical treatment. So the religious organizations have something to say in this area, and many religious organizations who have spoken have a global responsibility, and that's why they cannot be absent in this dialogue, which needs to be global in this new situation that we have in the world. The G20 Interfaith Forum would like to discuss these matters and include people representing academics and science with a global perspective, and which can be presented to the G20 leaders and leaders from different religious organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juan. Now we will be hearing Elena Lopez Ruf, who has been in charge in governance and faith group. Elena from Buenos Aires.
Thank you very much, Claudio. Thank you, Ambassador. And as you said, before the pandemic has put in evidence the inequality, but also the fragility of the governing systems, not only local but regional, national, international, and globally. And we have challenges and a very complex reality, but also the pandemic shows us a reality to be able to ponder, to think and imagine the possible futures that we can build together. And in this sense, as one said previously, the communities are in the first line of response of the emergency of the pandemic, or to show solidarity through the emergency local sectors, and to guarantee the fitting security, but not only on the front line as to the response of the pandemic, but also there are many religious communities that are thinking and working on preparing for the future. It's what is it that we need to generate? What do we need to generate, to create, specifically for those desires that we all have to have a dignified life and justice, and how we can realize those things. and all of those things that are going to the richness of the traditions of the communities and their practices, and generating a space to be able to open a space for the moral imagination, to open a space for those paths of hope. Because there is also something that pandemic has put in evidence is the need to work together, to work as an alliance. This year we'll be celebrating 5 years for the adoption of the 2030 agenda that has been accepted by the General Assembly of the United Nations. And we are also going to celebrate the what I was reminding you before previously. And both documents are an invitation to generate alliances and to open dialogue about the development and how we can live together. One of the proposals for this work group about religion and faith is to give a space of interchange, to be a channel of voices for the local communities about their experiences and learnings, especially to identify good practices and explore new modalities of cooperation in interreligion and intercultural in our region. But also, this work group reviews what has been done in other years. In 2018, when they did in Buenos Aires, the work that was done in governing matter, fight against how they treat the people, and also in the modern laws, and also in the fight against corruption. Because that's why this group is an invitation to explore and to challenge how to work together in the challenge of promoting participation mechanisms and articulation among religious organizations, governing institutions or entities, and multilateral organisms to face together this challenge that is presented to us, and to be able to create new groups of government for this cooperation for the development and international communities.
Thank you, Elena. And finally, Elias Shineski from Peru, who's going to coordinate the group about environment.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank Sid and Ambassador Alvaro and the G20 Interfaith Forum and Cole and Catherine and the Latin American Jewish Council, and thank you, Claudio, from Religions for Peace from the Caribbean, and for joining this regional interfaith meeting. And the G20 Interfaith meeting for 2020 has included many issues that deal with collective forces for protecting our common goods on our planet, and this is related to protecting health for everyone, water, and then as 15, which has to do with sustainable forest development, and also investing in measures that will slow down deforestation, and also the climate changes and their effect. And before the pandemic, 2020 was already considered a year for reflection and opportunity for planning and reducing the biodiversity curve. And there's a biological summit which has been prepared for biological effects after 2020, and around 60% of all infectious diseases and 65% of emerging infectious diseases are transmitted by animals, and the continued deforestation of the wild is something that's going to affect humans, such as diseases like COVID-19 that are affecting human beings. So protection of tropical rainforests play a major role in terms of biodiversity, as well as global climate change, and the support of lives of millions of indigenous people. The And this deforestation is a major threat to the global climate. Not only does this are there millions of CO2 emissions every year, but like we have already mentioned, the disappearance of some of the most diverse areas in the world, such as tropical rainforests, are having major effects on the world. And as we work together with faith, this is something that points out the moral obligation to protect the environment, such as the Inter-Religious Alliance for Tropical Forests, which is carrying out a major effort in terms of the challenges that forests have in the world, and to help local populations to seek solutions. And this will also be discussed by the environmental group, and it is one of the most serious challenges of the 21st century, and is from 2010. Water and health is something that has been specifically recognized by the United Nations as a human right. However, as Juan already mentioned, almost 30% of the world's population lacks some type of safe drinking water, in addition to 20% of humanity who lives without proper sanitation. And much of this polluted water that comes from human activity contains results in rivers, and many people are dying from diseases that are related to the water and that are predictable and that are also associated with the environment. At this point, we're trying to control the spread of COVID-19 and many other infectious diseases, such as by washing hands with water and soap and water. And it is so important that religious organizations are committed to promoting responsible management and equitable distribution of water for everyone, as well as the convincement of the fact that water is a sacred gift and a fundamental human right. An example of that, Pope Francis mentioned that the right to water is essential to survival of people, and thus a requirement to be able to exercise the other human rights. We have created an environmental group because it is one of the major issues of the 21st century, and the need to act in terms of climate change is something that will continue as CO2 emissions will increase. We need to reduce CO2 emissions and the greenhouse effect in the atmosphere. And this is also related to sustainable economic development. And this has become more important than ever. And often the consequences of these things are minimized, and people claim that they are not the result of human actions. And this is giving way to new forms of activism in different countries. And it is in this current scenario that we find several different types of climate activism, those who are in the domestic trenches and those who are interested in maintaining the economy without straying from the traditional path of contaminants. And there are people who think that climate change is an exaggeration, or who want to provide technological solutions to not have to reduce CO2 emissions. The COVID-19 pandemic is a tragic reminder that global issues require a collective effort. Climate change can indirectly affect the response to health matters. Religiously based organizations are essential to this effort and to enable people to exercise the human rights, especially those who are among the most vulnerable, and also the ecosystem that humanity depends on. And that's why many faith-based organizations have a long history of participating in UN climate and environmental meetings, and this can be fundamental in dealing with climate change. And despite the what has taken place during the 21st century, we continue to work on climate change issues, and we hope that these efforts will be aligned with science before the new G26 in Glasgow.
Elias, would you please finish? Okay.
Yes, I just finished.
Thank you, Elias. Thank you very much for your words, for all the words that we have been able to listen. And just like you said in a reference a few minutes ago, this process it's continues with the work of 4 different groups, with the intention that we can grow through the ideas for which in the screen will appear an email where we will pick up each one of the reflections that you can send us, please, through this email that is showing on the screen at this moment, which the topic and that we would like to share, or through the coordinators of the groups that we have get to know by name and by words. Please, for the next few weeks, the 4 groups will be working, and we invite you all so we can get reunited and gather to share the results of this process of the Forum Interfaith of G20. Only 2 final concepts, so we can finish these interventions and highlight a few ideas that we have listened. American Latin, it's all about and pointing about not just for the crisis COVID-19, but also for the ability to get through about different problems like the environment problems plus a few crises. Speaking about health, and this region is characterized for poverty, so the challenge is really big, and the invitation to go through this crisis that is presented by COVID-19 that will be increasing the bases that we already have in the region is that it's not about saving ourselves, it's about saving everyone. And this is a concept that we have been expressing, each one of us and which of the speakers, that about responsibility as a group that has a leaders and has a persons of faith we have, and has a message to share for the world at this moment in difficult times. As Rebecca point, at these difficult moments, but also about the concept of Rebecca and these difficult moments. I like the idea about the light, how it helps to be able to see more. So the light that we can share with the teachings that we can give of each of our religious and traditions could be a highlight, and so we can point the way to get through the crisis. And at last, for a few comments that we have been hearing, and our expectations, we were expecting questions in the chat. We had a lot of comments that we have been reading, and these comments will be we will be sending them to you so you guys can know what they express in each comment. So I want to highlight the concept of a healthy convivence about religions and different groups, and this after being able to see a lot of friends reunited in this forum that unfortunately I'm not able to mention each one of you, but this is all about the work that each one of us had been doing from our organizations, and this is really important for our regions. so we can also share this to the G20. And this is really important that we have built, that we have been this coexistence, we have built it by our convictions about the meaning of the coexistence. So from this plural spirit that we have as an Latin America, and these different opinions and traditions and religions that fortunately we have been able to build in a frame of a good friendship, I hope we can highlight a few ideas to reach and to be able to grow so we can lead to the G20 the valuable and rich considerations and comments and ideas that we have been able to listen so we can get closer. And I hope it helps to build a better world for all of us. And for all of us in this organization, one more time, thank you. Thank you all for each one of you to be part of this and participate on this meeting. Thank you for the organizations that have been involved, helping us and to get and to organize this to the forum G20 for the trust that have gave it to each one of us. Thank you all. We hope your ideas so we can reach and growth, and I hope this might be a light in the midst of darkness. Thank you very much.